My parents banned me from the attic for as long as I could remember. It was the one rule in our house that was never broken, never questioned. Anytime I even asked why, my mom's face would pale slightly while my dad's voice would turn sharp. The attic is off limits. End of story. As a kid, I thought maybe it was full of old junk or dangerous tools, nothing interesting. But as I got older, the mystery gnawed at me. There were no strange noises, no creaking floorboards or ghost stories attached to it. Just a heavy wooden door with a padlock at the top of the narrow stairs and parents who refused to speak of it. That silence made my curiosity grow stronger with each passing year. Whenever I saw my dad disappear up there late at night or my mom quickly glance toward the ceiling during tense conversations, I knew whatever they were hiding wasn't simple. My friends joked about it, calling it the forbidden room. Some even dared me to sneak up there, but I never did. Fear of my parents' reaction kept me in line. Until the night everything changed. It started with a storm. The wind howled, rattling the old windows while rain pounded the roof like a drum. Around midnight, a loud crash echoed through the house, followed by what sounded like footsteps directly above my room. My heart pounded as I sat up in bed. No one was supposed to be up there. The power flickered, casting strange shadows on my walls. I tried to convince myself it was just the storm, but the heavy thuds continued. That was when I noticed the padlock on the attic door hanging loosely, the latch broken as if forced open. My parents were out of town visiting relatives. I was alone. Against every instinct screaming at me, I grabbed a flashlight and crept toward the stairs. My hands trembled as I climbed each creaky step, the air growing colder with every foot of elevation. When I reached the top, I hesitated for a moment before pushing the attic door open. The flashlight's beam cut through the darkness, revealing dust swirling in the air like tiny ghosts. What I saw made my stomach drop. The attic wasn't filled with old furniture or forgotten boxes. Instead, it looked like a laboratory. Tables lined the walls, covered in glass containers, wires, and strange machines humming quietly. In the center was a large glass chamber connected to thick metal tubes, glowing faintly with a soft blue light. Inside the chamber floated what looked like a body. My breath caught. It wasn't quite human. The figure was small, pale, its limbs slightly too long, its head oversized, and its eyes closed but unnaturally large under thin eyelids. My mind raced to find some rational explanation, but there was none. My parents had hidden this thing upstairs my entire life. I backed away, my heart pounding, but accidentally bumped into a metal cart. The loud clang echoed through the attic, and suddenly, the figure inside the chamber twitched. The eyes shot open, revealing large black pupils that locked directly onto me. I froze, unable to move, paralyzed by fear as its thin fingers pressed against the glass from the inside. Then, from behind me, I heard footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, coming up the attic stairs. My parents were back. My dad's voice was calm but firm. "You weren't supposed to see this." My mom appeared behind him, her face pale but strangely emotionless. I stammered, my voice cracking. "What is that? What have you been hiding?" My dad sighed, his eyes heavy. "It's complicated. This was never meant for you to find." He walked toward the chamber and placed his hand gently on the glass. The creature inside responded, its movements calm under his touch. My mom finally spoke, her voice trembling. "We didn't want you involved. It's not dangerous. Not to us. It's part of our research, part of why we've always lived so isolated." My head spun. Research? What kind of research involved keeping a creature locked away in our attic for years? My dad continued. "It's not from here. We found it during a government contract years ago. When the project was shut down, we couldn't let them destroy it. We took it, kept it alive, studied it in secret. We've protected it." My legs felt weak, the weight of their confession crushing me. Everything I knew about my family was a lie, and standing in front of me was living proof of that horrifying secret. The attic felt smaller as my parents stood in front of me, calmly explaining the impossible. My dad's hand still rested on the glass chamber while the creature inside continued to watch me with those massive, unblinking eyes. My breath came in shallow bursts as my mom moved closer, lowering her voice like she was trying to soothe me. "We didn't plan this," she whispered. "You have to understand. When the research team was shut down, most of them wanted to destroy the specimen. But your father couldn't let that happen. It's not violent. It's not a threat. It just exists." I stared at her, struggling to form words. "You've kept this secret my entire life. Why?" My dad exhaled deeply, finally turning away from the chamber to face me fully. "Because no one can know. If the government found out we took it, they'd come for all of us. They'd take everything. We've protected it, and we've protected you." His voice was steady, like he believed every word. My legs shook as I tried to process everything. "What even is it?" I finally asked. My mom looked at the creature, her expression softening. "We believe it's an extraterrestrial life form. It crash-landed decades ago during one of your father's military contracts. The official story said nothing survived, but that wasn't true. This one did. They called it Project Echo." My stomach churned. "Echo?" My dad nodded slowly. "It's been living up here ever since. We built the chamber to sustain it. We've spent years studying its biology, trying to understand its origin. Its DNA is unlike anything on Earth." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I stumbled back toward the stairs, my head spinning with panic. "You've lied to me for years," I whispered. My dad's voice sharpened. "We had to. For your safety. For everyone's safety. If the wrong people found out about Echo, they wouldn't stop until they controlled it or destroyed it." My mom reached for my hand, but I pulled away. I need to think. I need to get out of here. I rushed down the stairs, my pulse pounding in my ears. I locked myself in my room, trying to breathe, trying to calm the storm in my head. My parents didn't follow. They gave me space, but I could still hear them talking in hushed tones through the thin walls. That night, I barely slept. Images of the creature's face burned in my mind. Every memory of my childhood suddenly felt tainted, knowing what had been lurking just a few feet above me all these years. The next morning, my parents acted like nothing had changed. They made breakfast, asked about my classes, pretended our lives were still normal, but I couldn't pretend. I couldn't live in that house, knowing what was in the attic. I reached out to Mia, my best friend since middle school. She was the only person I trusted. When I told her everything, she stared at me like I'd lost my mind. But after showing her the pictures I secretly took on my phone, her disbelief turned to horror. "This is insane," she whispered. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know," I admitted, "but we can't keep this secret. Someone needs to know." Mia agreed. She suggested we contact a journalist she knew, someone who had exposed government cover-ups before, someone who might actually believe us. But the risk was enormous. If my parents found out I was planning to expose Echo, I didn't know what they would do. And worse, if the government found out first, it wouldn't just be my parents in danger. We all would be. The decision weighed on me for days. Every time I looked at my parents, I felt sick. They moved through the house like nothing had changed, like I hadn't discovered their secret. But everything had changed. I couldn't unsee what was in the attic. I couldn't unhear their lies. Mia and I continued planning quietly. The journalist she reached out to, a woman named Claire, responded almost immediately after seeing the evidence. She wanted to meet in person. I was terrified. If my parents caught wind of this, I didn't know how far they'd go to protect their secret. The night before the meeting, I barely slept. My parents acted oddly calm, almost like they sensed something was happening but weren't sure what. At one point, my dad knocked on my door and stood there silently for a moment before speaking. "You know we love you, right?" he said softly. "We only ever wanted to protect you." I nodded but said nothing. There was nothing left to say. The next afternoon, Mia and I met Claire at a small cafe far from town. She was sharp, professional, and completely unfazed by the insanity of what we were telling her. "I've heard whispers about Project Echo before," she said quietly. "But this is the first hard evidence anyone's brought me." She reviewed the photos, asked us detailed questions, and listened carefully. "This story could blow everything wide open," Claire said. "But you need to understand the risk. If we go public, your parents won't be the only ones targeted. Government agencies, private contractors, they'll all come after this. And you." I knew she was right, but I also knew I couldn't live with myself if I stayed silent. We agreed to proceed carefully. Claire would start her investigation, gather more evidence, and prepare to release the story once everything was airtight. But we had no idea how little time we actually had. 2 nights later, everything unraveled. I woke to the sound of helicopters overhead and the flashing glow of headlights through my window. The entire house shook as black SUVs pulled into our driveway. Armed agents in tactical gear stormed the property, shouting orders as my parents screamed from downstairs. I scrambled out of bed, my heart racing as the front door was kicked open. Government agents flooded the house, yelling for everyone to freeze. I was grabbed by 2 officers and pulled into the hallway as I screamed for my parents. My dad was already in handcuffs, my mom crying hysterically as agents restrained her. I caught a brief glimpse of several agents running toward the attic stairs, weapons drawn. Echo was no longer a secret. It was a full-blown operation. "They found it," I whispered in shock. One of the lead agents turned to me, his face cold and stern. "We've known for a while. You should have come to us first." I was shoved into a separate vehicle from my parents, driven to a facility I didn't recognize. Interrogators grilled me for hours, demanding to know who else I had told, what Claire knew, and how much evidence had been shared. I kept repeating the truth. I just wanted to do the right thing. But it didn't matter. The government had no intention of letting this story escape. That night, as I sat alone in a cold, windowless room, I realized I had been naive. My parents' fear wasn't paranoia. It was survival. And now, I was trapped in the very nightmare I had tried to expose. The cold metal chair beneath me felt like ice as I sat alone in the interrogation room. Hours passed without anyone returning, leaving me trapped with my racing thoughts. My parents had lived with this secret for years, always looking over their shoulders, and now I understood why. The government didn't want the truth to come out, because the truth was too big, too dangerous. Eventually, the door opened. A man in a dark suit entered, his face expressionless as he placed a folder on the table. He sat down across from me, folding his hands neatly. "You've created quite a mess," he said calmly. I stayed silent, too exhausted to respond. He slid the folder toward me and flipped it open, revealing the photos I had given Claire. "We know about the journalist," he continued. "We intercepted the communications days ago. You're lucky we got here before your story went public." My stomach twisted. "What happens now?" I asked quietly. He leaned forward slightly. "You have 2 choices. Option 1, you cooperate fully. You tell us everything, hand over any additional files, and agree to remain silent. You go back to your life, but under permanent surveillance. Your parents will serve their sentences, but you'll be protected." I swallowed hard, dreading his next words. "Option 2, he continued. "You refuse. If that happens, you'll be classified as a national security threat. We'll ensure your story never sees the light of day. Your life as you know it will be over. My heart pounded in my chest. It was a trap disguised as a choice. Cooperate and live under constant watch, or resist and be erased. Either way, I would never be free. What about Echo? I asked. What are you going to do with it? His expression darkened slightly. That's classified. But I'll tell you this. The creature isn't just an alien life form. It holds genetic data that could revolutionize medicine, technology, even military applications. That's why it can't fall into the wrong hands. My hands shook under the table. So you're not protecting anyone. You just want to control it. He didn't deny it. Control is necessary, he said. Without it, chaos follows. I lowered my head, realizing how deep this went. My parents had tried to protect me, but in doing so, they had trapped me in a secret far bigger than any of us could handle. After hours of silence and threats, I finally signed the agreement. I had no choice. The alternative was far worse. The next day I was released, but warned that my every move would be monitored. Claire's investigation was shut down, her sources silenced. The story vanished before it ever had the chance to surface. My parents were relocated to a federal facility. I wasn't told where, and Echo was transported to a classified government lab, its fate sealed behind locked doors. In the weeks that followed, I tried to return to some form of normal life, but nothing was normal anymore. Every phone call, every conversation, every move I made was under surveillance. The weight of the secret suffocated me. Mia visited often, offering support, but even she was now being watched. We both knew speaking openly was dangerous. The government's reach was absolute. But despite everything, one thought haunted me constantly. Echo was still out there, still alive, and now completely under the control of people who saw it as nothing more than a resource to exploit. And deep down, I knew that someday, this secret would resurface in ways none of us could predict. Months passed, but the weight of the secret never lifted. My life became a carefully monitored routine. Every message I sent, every website I visited, every conversation I had was tracked. The government agents didn't need to remind me that I was being watched. I felt it in every moment of every day. Mia did her best to support me, but even our friendship changed under the pressure. We spoke in code when we had to talk about anything sensitive. Even simple texts became carefully crafted puzzles, designed to avoid triggering suspicion. The stress was unbearable, but we knew the consequences of slipping up. Meanwhile, news reports occasionally hinted at strange scientific advancements being made behind closed doors. Breakthroughs in genetic engineering, rapid medical developments that seemed almost too advanced for current technology. I knew, without any doubt, that Echo's genetic material was behind it. The government had turned my parents' secret into a goldmine of research, all while keeping the truth buried from the public. Then, one evening, Mia showed up at my apartment unexpectedly. Her face was pale, and she looked around nervously before stepping inside. I closed the door quickly, locking it behind her. "You need to see this," she whispered, pulling a flash drive from her pocket. My hands shook as I inserted it into my laptop. On the screen appeared a series of files, leaked documents, lab reports, even classified memos from the facility where Echo was being held. Mia's contact, a whistleblower inside the lab, had risked everything to get us this information. The documents confirmed what we had feared. Echo wasn't just being studied. Its DNA was being spliced into human test subjects. The government had moved beyond observation. They were actively creating hybrids, blending human and extraterrestrial genetics to create enhanced soldiers, immune systems, and cognitive abilities far beyond normal capacity. The experiments were still in early phases, but the results were staggering. Several subjects had already shown accelerated healing, heightened senses, and near superhuman strength, but with these enhancements came severe side effects, organ failures, mental instability, and in some cases complete cellular breakdown. The files included disturbing photos and detailed reports of the failed experiments, listing subjects by number instead of name. They weren't just conducting research anymore, they were playing God. My stomach churned as I scrolled through the data. "This is worse than we thought," I whispered. Mia nodded, her voice tight with fear. "They're trying to create something they can't control." I stared at the screen, horrified. If this leaked, it wouldn't just expose Echo. It would expose the entire government operation behind it, but releasing this information would also make us targets all over again. Mia's contact warned us that others within the facility were starting to grow suspicious of the leaks. We didn't have much time. We were faced with a choice once again. Stay silent and let this nightmare continue, or risk everything to finally bring the truth to light. But this time, we weren't just exposing a secret, we were exposing a weapon. The weight of the decision crushed me for days. Mia and I met in secret, always paranoid that our conversations were being recorded or that someone was watching us from the shadows. The information we had was dangerous, not just for us but for anyone connected to it. The whistleblower inside the facility was risking their life by feeding us these files. But the more we uncovered, the more we realized staying silent wasn't an option. The documents described new trials set to begin within weeks. They were preparing to expand human testing on a much larger scale. The subjects weren't volunteers. They were prisoners, people who had no say in what was being done to them. I couldn't live with myself knowing people were being experimented on like that. All because of what my parents had hidden in our attic. Mia and I contacted Claire again, the journalist who had originally tried to help us before the government shut everything down. She had gone underground after the first operation, but she never stopped investigating. When she saw the new files, she paled. "This is bigger than I ever imagined," she whispered. "We can't sit on this." We made a plan. Claire would work with her network of trusted journalists and whistleblower organizations to release the information globally, simultaneously, making it impossible for the government to contain. But we knew what would happen once the story broke. We would lose whatever freedom we had left. A few days before the release, I received another letter. This one wasn't from my parents or the government. It was from Emily, the whistleblower inside the facility. She explained why she had risked everything to expose the project. "I was one of the original scientists assigned to study Echo," she wrote. "What your parents did was dangerous, but they did it to protect Echo. The people who took over after them have no such compassion. They only see power." She described how the project had shifted from research to militarization, how new leadership pushed the boundaries further with no regard for consequences. She had watched as innocent people suffered horrific outcomes, and she couldn't stay silent anymore. Her final words haunted me. "Once the truth is out, they'll come for me too. But at least the world will know." On the night of the release, everything happened fast. The files were published worldwide by dozens of outlets. Headlines screamed about illegal genetic experimentation, secret government programs, and inhumane human trials. The public outcry was immediate and explosive. Protests erupted across the country. Politicians scrambled to deny knowledge, while high-ranking officials were forced to resign. The secret was finally out. But so was our location. Within hours of the leak, government agents swarmed Mia's apartment. We barely escaped through a back exit, disappearing into the underground network Claire had prepared for us. We were officially fugitives, hunted by the very people we had tried to expose. But for the first time in years, I felt something close to relief. The truth was no longer buried. The world knew what my parents had hidden, what the government had built, and what they had nearly unleashed. We had bought the world time. But as Mia and I hid in the safe house, we both knew this wasn't over. The people behind Project Echo wouldn't disappear quietly, and whatever they had already created was still out there. The days following the release were a blur of constant movement, secrecy, and fear. Claire's underground network kept us hidden, rotating between safe houses while the government launched a full-scale manhunt for anyone connected to the leak. Despite the chaos, the public reaction continued to grow. Every major news outlet dissected the documents, showing undeniable proof of the illegal genetic experiments and the horrifying extent of the government's cover-up. International leaders condemned the project, demanding investigations and sanctions. But while the world's attention focused on the scandal, we knew the true danger hadn't passed. The core members behind Project Echo hadn't been caught. They had simply vanished, retreating further into the shadows. Claire's contacts continued feeding us bits of information. Some of the original labs had been emptied before the raids. Equipment, data, and even some of the enhanced subjects were missing. The project hadn't died. It had simply gone deeper underground. One evening, as Mia and I sat in the dimly lit safe house, Claire arrived with news that chilled us to the core. "They're starting over," she said, her voice low. "The people behind Project Echo have relocated overseas. New labs, new funding, and they're recruiting scientists who don't care about ethics." I felt my stomach twist. All of this, after everything we'd done, and they were already rebuilding. Claire nodded grimly. "This isn't just a rogue program anymore. Private investors, corporations, even foreign governments are involved now. They see profit, power. They won't stop." Mia clenched her fists. "Then we keep fighting. We can't let them do this again." Claire hesitated, her eyes dark. "Fighting them now means going deeper than ever. We won't have the same protection. The people we're dealing with now aren't worried about exposure. They're willing to make anyone disappear who gets in their way." I knew she was right. We had exposed one layer of the operation, but in doing so, we had triggered something far more dangerous. This was no longer just about Echo. This was about an entire industry being born in the shadows, one that could change humanity forever if left unchecked. Still, I couldn't walk away. Not after everything we had sacrificed. My parents were still imprisoned, their futures uncertain. Emily, the whistleblower, had vanished after the release. Her safety was unknown. And Echo itself, the creature my parents had hidden for so long, was still missing. No one knew where it had been taken after the raids. The world knew the truth now, but the consequences of that truth had only just begun to unfold. As I sat there, the weight of our fight pressing down on me, I realized something. Exposing the secret had been the easy part. Stopping what came next would be the real battle. And I wasn't sure any of us were ready for what was coming. The months that followed turned into a dangerous game of survival. Mia, Claire, and I stayed constantly on the move, never staying in one place longer than a few days. The people behind Project Echo had resources that reached further than we had ever imagined. They weren't just private contractors or rogue government scientists anymore. They were global. Each safe house felt less secure than the last. Every knock on the door, every unfamiliar face in a crowd triggered a fresh wave of panic. Despite the fear, we pushed forward, gathering new intel from whistleblowers who, inspired by our exposure, began coming out of hiding to share what they knew. The network we uncovered was vast. Offshore labs operating on floating barges to avoid jurisdiction, secret compounds deep in ungoverned territories, even private medical facilities posing as legitimate research institutions. They were not only continuing the work started with Echo's DNA but expanding it into new terrifying directions. Genetic enhancements were being sold to the highest bidder. Private armies, wealthy elites, and corrupt governments were quietly experimenting with gene manipulation, designing soldiers, athletes, and even children engineered for perfection. What started as my parents' secret had evolved into a worldwide crisis. But through it all, one question haunted me more than any other. Where was Echo? Then one night, we got an answer. Claire's contact intercepted a private encrypted communication between two key players inside the network. Echo had been moved again, this time to an undisclosed location in Eastern Europe. But the message hinted at something far more terrifying. They weren't just studying Echo anymore. They were replicating it. They had successfully cloned the original organism and were attempting to mass-produce variations with different genetic modifications, using its biology as a template for entire new species designed to serve their purposes. I stared at the message in horror. "They're creating an army," I whispered. Claire's face was grim. "If they succeed, there's no telling how far this will go. Enhanced organisms, hybrids, soldiers that don't feel pain or fear, all controlled by people with no moral boundaries." Mia gripped my arm, her voice shaking. "We have to stop them." But we were running out of time and options. Claire's network was strong, but we were fighting something far larger and far more dangerous than a single government project. These people were willing to kill to keep their experiments alive. As dawn broke, we sat in silence, knowing that the next phase of this fight would be even darker. We had pulled back the curtain, exposed the monster hiding in the attic of the world, but now that monster was growing stronger, more ruthless, and far more unstoppable. My parents' secret had started a chain reaction that neither they nor I could ever undo. But I knew one thing with absolute certainty. As long as I was breathing, I wouldn't stop fighting, because what was hiding in those labs wasn't just science anymore. It was something much worse, and if we failed, the world would never recover.